Thank you. Okay, so sorry everyone. The slide is not advancing. Apologize. Let's see if I can get it to. There we go. Okay, so this evening we are going to be talking about the definition of single parents and statistics. We're also going to be looking at parenting in general, the advantages of single parenting, the challenges that come along with being a single parent, and the challenges of single parenting within the foster care system. So, what does it mean to be a single parent? When thinking about that, a single parent is someone who is unmarried, single by choice, or single through the loss of their partner, or single through divorce. There are also families who may have two parents in the household, but one of the parents is maybe gone for significant periods of time, such as if that parent is maybe in the service, which then leaves the primary caregiver to be the caregiver and parent that is in charge. The single parent household can be headed by a mother or a father, or it can be a grandparent or a relative, or any person who fits that single status. Here's a chart that shows some of the statistics. And according to the research that's been done, between 25 to 30% of children under the age of 18 in the US live in a single parent household, which the US Census reports work out of roughly 22 million children living with a single parent. They also report 3 times as many women when compared with men are the head of the household. And you can see that the span of this is kind of looking at starting around 1970 to about 2020 or 2022 is the years that are captured in this chart. Oh, and sorry, it clearly states that. So, what does it mean to be a single parent? Sometimes you may find that there's many questions that some people may question, like our effectiveness, or if we are shortchanging our kids in some way by being single parents. But single parents should, definitely be reassured by the fact that many studies find no difference between the children in single parent households and the children from other types of households. One study had even looked into the lives of children from different kinds of households, such as two-parent biological households, adoptive families, stepfathers, stepmothers, single parents, and the type of house. And we're noting that that type of household did not matter, that children's grades and their relationships with their siblings and their friends were about the same across those different households that I had gone over, whether it's like the stepfather or the stepmother. But they were noticing that there wasn't a significant difference in how children were doing academically. In a survey that they did of adolescents living in 9 types of households, those who lived with parents who had always been single and who were being raised in multi-generational households reported that the highest sense of well-being of all those surveyed that it's most important for single parents to let go of this mindset that a child living in their home without two parents will not be well supported, because a child is still very well supported even when not living in a two-parent home. And that it's also only true if both parents are, totally engaged and offering the same level of attention for their children, that also, can show, another additional level of like support, even if the parents aren't living in the same home, but still are very attentive to their child, that can still carry the same weight of being in a two-parent household, but yet the child may be in a single parent household, but still have that engagement and involvement from both of their parents. Looking at parenting guidelines, creating a loving environment, giving your child attention and time, building respectful relationships, being a good disciplinarian, and also being a good role model. So, let's talk a little bit about parenting in general before we go on too far. Being a parent involves so many different things. As I shared, it involves being a role model, providing physical, psychological, and emotional support, teaching life skills, instilling, morals and values. But most of all, it also means taking responsibility of being a part of the process of raising a child, for, either from birth or from, when they moved in with you until adulthood and beyond. And that's, as I'm sure some would say, oh, that's just super easy to do. But, when we're in this process, we also know that there are so many different factors that, weigh on the impact of, as we're doing this journey and going through this journey. If you probably take nothing else away from tonight's training, the hope is definitely that you feel like truly appreciated for all that you are doing to make a difference in the life of the child or children that are with you. So, let's look at some basic needs and things that, as parents, what we do to establish healthy environments. So, in establishing healthy environments, and creating a loving environment, we want to give our children, lots of love and affection, praising them, showing praise around their accomplishments that they may do, helping your child build a strong character. Let's see. Sorry. Giving your child attention and time, being there for them, letting them know it's okay to be different or independent. You don't want to place unreasonable expectations on your child, but you also, you want to be able to be there for their milestones and, make one-on-one time for each child in your home. And practicing and building respectful relationships, teaching good manners, letting them participate in household chores that you may do, whether it's like emptying out the dishwasher, having them participate in the process of like, doing their clothes, doing their laundry when you feel that it's age appropriate. Not comparing your child to others, including even other siblings in the home. And, with being a good disciplinarian, letting your child make their own mistakes when it benefits potentially a learning life lesson. but also setting realistic boundaries, enforcing reasonable rules and consequences, giving choices, and being consistent with those rules. And in being a good role model, showing responsibility, modeling honesty, politeness, kindness, charitability, modeling boundaries, especially like when it comes to like screen time or other digital devices. But this list, as I've just listed a few things, but this list can definitely go on and on. But kind of one of the main points is that parenting is the act and attitude of unconditional love. Raising kids in a relationship rooted in love and nurturing them and helping them thrive to be the best version of themselves that they can be is what parenting is all about. And, it can be done in tandem with others, but it can also be done as a single parent. So here I have this next slide pulled up that's listing some of the advantages of single parenting. And with most anything in life, there are advantages and there are disadvantages. Being a single parent, you get to experience a lot of advantages. Focusing on the positive can help us face the challenges that can also come along with being a single parent. As a single parent, the onus is on you as the parent and managing the home. You are the boss. And when you know that there is no one else in the house to take care of certain responsibilities, but you step right up and do it. You make sure that you find a way of doing it, yourself to the best of your abilities. And it's going to look different in every home, what that looks like and the different things that you are doing. But, there are definitely benefits, and some of the advantages are, the independence that you can have, being able to make all the decisions. You manage the finances. Your children will, also learn to be super responsible. Your children will get that undivided attention from you. You get the flexibility in parenting, and you'll be that role model. You get to pursue your dreams, and you get to develop also a strong network. With being independent and, being a single parent, it's also not always about facing challenges. It's about celebrating the unexpected joys. It's important to, recognize the positive outcomes of being single and independent. Not having someone else to rely on in the daily life. Single parents, often become, really self-reliant and resilient. The independence that you face and that you come across, like, it doesn't go unnoticed by your children, and they will learn the importance of that self-sufficiency and that problem solving that they see you doing, and the making decisions on their own as they see you make decisions. Being a single parent can give relief from having to convince someone else about daily responsibilities and expenses and arguments or negotiations that may come up, and some of the different stresses that can come with having those conversations, unless you maybe find that you have teenagers and then potentially you're having those conversations and juggling that with them when, they're learning the different tactics around budgeting and setting schedules and all that planning. But children growing up in a peaceful environment, They may develop a heightened sense of empathy and understanding, having observed that strength and perseverance that you display. This emotional intelligence can be so beneficial for children to see that as they're growing up. They also see, you making the decisions. And, it's been said that adults, make around 35,000 decisions a day. And some of those are made on impulse, while others are going to be made after following a well thought out plan. One of the benefits of being a single parent is that you have the autonomy in decision making and the entire authority of making decisions. And that entire authority of making that decision will rest on you. And yes, that can definitely feel scary and intimidating, but it can also feel really, liberating and energizing to, make those decisions. Managing your family's daily responsibilities and learning to enjoy the decision making on your own can help build self-confidence and, allow you to feel empowered in ultimately choosing the best for yourself and for your family. Finding ways to tackle life's challenges will allow you to be the best person and the best parent that you can be. When you're managing finances, you have the autonomy in the decision making. Your stress, it can also allow you to, relook at things. It can allow you to experience, the flexibility, the responsiveness to the needs of your family as a single parent. You also will have the choice to decide how you spend the money on your children and on yourself. You are the one who will be learning how to make that budget and, deciding like what feels like the right budget for your family when it comes to yearly planning or monthly planning or daily planning. Did you know that when you write down your financial goals, it makes it over 40% more likely that you will accomplish those objectives when writing it down. You will also be able to help your children understand finances and, teach them to be more responsible and, better at managing money and planning for their futures. And, your children will, learn to be super responsible. Children that live in single parent families are more likely to be responsible because they're seeing the single parent that they look up to, helping with decision making. They're seeing the planning that they're doing, the thought that they're giving to things. One of the best positives about single parents is that children get a stronger sense of responsibility and they try their best to do things right. And this increases their confidence. It increases their self-esteem. They learn and enjoy the sense of accomplishment, and the importance of teamwork that also comes around. Instead of relying, only on yourself, you also learn to expand that into a team and being able to, rely on others and count on others. Your child learns how to work together. They learn the sense of responsibility that, that definitely they see you having to do as a parent. And, and also they learned, the responsibility that can come from working in a team and, doing the everyday decision making. As I had noted, your children getting your undivided attention. If you're dating someone, or potentially you're already in a relationship, um, as a child of a single parent, your children will get, sorry, I misspoke. So like, unless you're dating someone, then like your children will get your undivided attention. And even if you are dating someone, you still can be sure to like, set aside that time and make that time for that one-on-one connection with you and your child or your children. Um, as you work together and evolve, yourself and your child's like education or the activities that they're doing, you're spending more and more time with each other. And you work together at home as your children are getting older, when it comes to like doing chores, as I had shared earlier. Maybe you're working together to make dinner. Just those different activities or things that you can make time for, because it's like making dinner at home, you can do that together with your children. Or whether potentially it's that you set aside time of that, maybe you're going to fold some laundry, and then like after that, like do a board game together. But setting aside that time to also be really clear with the one-on-one time and the undivided attention. um as I mentioned, you get flexibility in parenting. Single parenting provides you with the freedom to adopt a consistent parenting style. You can go adopt the style that seems to fit best for you and your children without having to negotiate with another parent on the methods that you're choosing to do. You can have that consistency in your parenting style that also provides a stable home environment. And this is significant for children. And also having that consistency around like academics, or the consistency around the social engagements that they make, and the emotional development and growth. Having the flexibility for you to be able to set things as you feel fit to help everyone in your home thrive. You'll be the role model for the child. As a single parent, you'll show your abilities with being able to multitask, demonstrate the strength and independence and the ability to overcome challenges that may arise. By showing resilience and determination, you serve as a strong, positive role model for the children or child in your home. Your words and your actions, they greatly influence the children. And your children will not only witness your positive attitude, but they learn some very useful and valuable skills from you. They observe and learn qualities like independence and the quality of resilience. And, they will understand the importance of being self-sufficient and responsible from a very young age. And this is particularly important as it prepares them to face the challenges in life while growing up. And it helps them cope with the solitude and, navigate life. Your children will also get to see and watch you pursue your dreams. Single parenthood provides you with the opportunity to follow dreams that you may have and achieve your goals. You get the freedom to pursue your personal, educational, and professional goals at your pace. When you follow your dreams, you set a positive example for your children that illustrates the importance of ambition and self-improvement and achievement. And another item is that, you get to develop that strong network. You get to develop that network, whether it be with your family, your friends, or, other support groups, um, that offer a shared experience and emotional support and also practical advice. And developing a social network, that can reduce the feeling of loneliness, and it can, give you a sense of belonging. You get the support from your social network when, maybe you're stuck on a decision and need assistance with, maybe childcare, or, when you need some time off from a very busy schedule. These are the people who you can count on, and they become very important and a big part of your life. With these advantages, there definitely can be the challenges, because, being a single parent can definitely be challenging at times. It has a unique set of challenges and stressors. With all the difficulties, the challenges of dual burdens, and the responsibility as a single parent, it can be tough. And sometimes, no matter what positive spin that we put on it, or that, we try to tell ourselves, being a single parent can also be a very hard job with too much to do, and, less time for yourself, no time, to be out with friends, and hardly any time to meet other people. And even though we presented some of these as advantages, they can also represent disadvantages. But by understanding these difficulties, you are, much more likely to face them and come up with solutions. You can create, a healthy family dynamic for yourself and for your children. And so, let's relook again at some of these advantages that we had noted. So, being short on money. One of the most common challenges faced by single parents is the financial burden that can come with managing a household, managing the expenses, and raising a child or children as a single parent and on a single parent income. Research has shown that the cost is around $234,000 to raise a child these days. And that cost increases every year. Spending all your time, attention, and energy on focusing on the finances can take a major toll on you, leading to, a potentially negative impact on the child's development and on the way you behave with them, until you have a proper plan where you can balance your income and expenses and have it not feel so difficult, or not feel like it's something that is taking up all of your concentration and keeping you from really being able to focus on other things. So some of the things that we can do are, we can visit and explore information on websites that offer money management advice. You can set up budgets, write down some financial goals for yourself and your family. As I had shared earlier in this, in a few slides, or mentioned earlier about, when you write things down, it's 40% more likely to be able to allow you to follow through with it. You can find ways to save money, shopping at thrift stores, double checking your receipts, keeping an eye on the outgoing expenses, using coupons, making meal plans, avoiding impulse purchases, planning ahead, contacting the companies about lowering your bills or changing maybe the bill due date, starting a savings account, and also creating an emergency fund account. These are some of just a few of the things, and and there's so many more too, but these are just some of those items that you can do when coming and looking at managing finances. And also when applicable, trying to involve your children in the budget planning to make it easier to manage money as well, keeping them in the loop, because then they will also be able to get an insight and get knowledge around the difficulty of balancing, because they're seeing what we're doing. And so when you feel it's suitable, or on certain things, allowing them to be a part of that plan. So maybe when it comes to meal planning, sitting down together, planning out meals together. um this will allow also just to kind of give you that balance between the work life and parenting. But at times, as we know that you may find yourself being overloaded with work. And so while, being a single parent will give you the run of the house, and you will be able to be the only one who makes the decisions related to your home and your children, it also means that you might find yourself feeling overloaded with all the things that you have to oversee. And, juggling a career and the responsibilities of raising a child can at times be very overwhelming for single parents. The demands of a job, and then combined with the daily tasks of parenting, can lead to burnout and stress. And the balancing act becomes even more challenging when unexpected situations come up, like a child, being sick. The absence of another parent to share those responsibilities can amplify that challenge. Or if you're trying to make your money count, you probably will also maybe try to avoid additional expenses, such as potentially maybe hiring for a nanny or household help, or hiring for childcare, or paying for potentially childcare if your child is school age, having those additional expenses that can come up with paying for after school care. And so what this also means is that even though you may find that you can save money in other areas, the time you spend doing everything else can get overwhelming, and you'll feel overworked, and you may feel irritated. And also if your children are still young, you may find that you're faced with the workload task of work feeling like a lot, and then when you're coming home, the task of caring for young children, and trying to delegate all of those, all the things that need to get done, and all the tasks that need to get done, that potentially at that time are not able to maybe be a shared responsibility that's done. And so with that, some of the things that you can do are prioritizing the responsibilities, creating a schedule. If childcare is an option, utilizing childcare, or if you're able to, negotiating with your employer for what you may need, or things that you may want. um you know don't be afraid of career transitions and reinventing yourself, because sometimes you may need to make that career change. Considering flexible work arrangements, being sure to practice good self-care for yourself, planning ahead, whenever possible, and being prepared for the unexpected as much as you can, practicing effective time management, the use of supports from others, creating good boundaries, using effective stress management strategies, and recognizing the signs of burnout, and taking proactive steps to prevent it. Effective time management is essential to striking that balance between work and parenting and your personal endeavors. And being able to maximize your productivity, that enables you to fulfill your professional responsibilities while still also, dedicating quality time to your children. And setting that quality time, that is, that's so vital, for yourself and for your children, for your children's growth and development, as well as for, nurturing that parent and child bond. Setting good time management also can contribute significantly to your own well-being, and ensuring that you have those moments to be able to get in that self-care and that relaxation. When the demands of the daily life are so much, it's really important to set that self-care for yourself, and utilizing the support from others, creating those good boundaries, like we said, using the effectiveness of a stretch man of strategies that you can do to help alleviate that stress that can come up. Those are just all, really key things that, that you can do. And you may find that some months, of course, like these things that you've outlined for yourself go better than others. And then other months, you may feel like potentially you're starting kind of at square one again with like prioritizing those responsibilities and creating that schedule. It's always something that's moving. At times you may find that you're feeling lonely, even though, you have your children with you. You may crave that adult company, even if it's just for some end of the day grown-up conversations. As you are, the main and maybe the only caregiver to your children, you will rarely have the time or opportunity to go out and socialize with others. And, that can definitely feel lonely, not meeting other people, not being able to spend time with friends can also, make you feel extremely lonely, and, lead to social isolation. This will also mean that, you may find that you have limited time for being able to get that self-care that you're trying to set aside for yourself. So, some things that you can do are join a support group. If it's something that you're able to do, hire some childcare, as part of your self-care. ask for support, nurture work relationships, meet friends for lunch while your children are, either in childcare or at school if they're school age. Taking a day off, from work from time to time, spending it with other adults, while your kids are in childcare or at school. But also, setting aside time to apply self-care daily. Whether it's maybe, getting out and exercising, taking a nap, meditating, just, maybe even a phone call. Sometimes maybe you just find that you have some free moments and you can just make a phone call to a friend or a family member. Doing some of that is self-care. Oops. Oh, sorry, the slide does not want to advance. Just 1 second. I apologize. So now the conversation around disciplining your child and, and what that can look like as a single parent. Because, whether you're a single parent or not, discipline, it can definitely be an issue at times. Parenting challenges can vary greatly, and what works for one child may not work for another. And parenting styles are not a one size fits all. They require individualized approaches that evolve over time. And, being a single parent requires you to adapt and be flexible in your disciplinary approach to effectively, meet the changing needs of your child. And this is where creativity comes to play. Finding unique solutions tailored to your children. When, faced with challenging behaviors, looking at and considering what the root cause is and adjusting your disciplinary tactics accordingly. Staying open to trying new strategies and being willing to adapt, to your child as they grow and as, their behaviors change. So, some of the things that we can do is, establishing clear rules and boundaries. Setting your house rules with your kids. No one likes being told what to do. So sometimes there won't be an opportunity for input or negotiation when establishing rules. But when there is an opportunity, having a family meeting, or a conversation or a chat and letting your kids be a part of the process of what, they feel are good rules in the home is also, a great way to, build further connection between you and your children. Um, you know, being consistent when you're, reinforcing your rules or your expectations. While you may be trying to do everything to make your child comfortable and feel safe and loved, there are moments when your child, may feel abandoned or uninvolved, and they may react in a rebellious way or, potentially show aggressive behavior. So then using positive reinforcement techniques, rewarding that good behavior, ignoring when, a child is acting out, and, as long as it's not a safety issue, because of course there are situations where you can't just ignore it. But if it's not a safety issue, ignoring the behavior, encouraging positive choices, active listening and engaging, with your child to, help redirect, encouraging timeouts or cooling off periods for all, for everyone in the home, and modeling that desired behavior that you want to see, setting a good example, valuing problem solving skills, taking parenting classes that include discipline techniques, and then, tailoring that discipline to your child's development and age and the situation. Children can be, very smart at emotionally manipulating their parents. And, if your child is experiencing feelings of loneliness and upset, or they're sad, you may have trouble disciplining them, as well as being able to follow up on the rules that, maybe you've set previously. You may need to adjust those rules or the boundary, and periodically, check in and see, is the situation that's happening now, is this rule that you've set, is it appropriate? Is the boundary that you've set, is it working? Is it efficient? Because sometimes, separate from the boundaries, you may find also, potentially, like, the emotion that your child is displaying, or the actions that your child is displaying, is showing that, the rules and the boundaries that you've set are just not, just not effectively working. And so being flexible and change, and making changes at times, and checking in and seeing, maybe, like, what is bothering them, asking if your child is, able to answer, or, keeping an eye and watching the actions that they're displaying. Giving your child undivided attention, as we talked about earlier. Each day, setting aside time, having, conversations, joining, single parent support groups, and, and as mentioned, also seeking professional advice, when needed. Navigating the social effects of single parenting. Single parents are often faced with social judgment, stigmatism. Uh, the social effects of single parenting can manifest in various different ways, such as unsolicited advice that you may receive, stereotypes that you may find, being said, or even discrimination. And children also might be faced with questions or comments from their peers about the absence of one parent, which can lead to a feeling of isolation and difference, when they're interacting with their, classmates. So, some of the things that we can do is, we can cultivate the friendships and relationships that support your single lifestyle. Using a good support system of like-minded individuals, creating a village approach, and partaking in community activities that model all types of family structures for your children to see. You know, meeting the needs of your family with intentional interactions, such as like the Boys and Girls Club, mentoring programs, YMCA. You know, lower your expectations and do away with any ideas of perfection. You know, lose your sense of guilt, you know, or victimhood, and ignore the judgmental people, to, you know, to the best of your ability. And in having and also, you know, having conversations with your children around things that may come up. You know, kind of having those conversations around things that potentially you think that they may hear or maybe already have heard, and just kind of, you know, doing that like role play conversation of how then they could respond to such things or not respond, you know, but also just providing that reassurance for your children. You know, because you know, single parenting definitely can be difficult, but you know, you're not alone. And as, you know, like shown in the chart that we had looked at earlier, the total number of children living with single parents was 19,224. So we come to the, you know, trying to find time for self-care. Because, you know, as we know, like all parents need that time to recharge, refuel, and reset. And that can definitely be tricky to coordinate, you know, with a, you know, typical busy home, with working, finding that time can be really difficult. However, you know, when you are parenting a child, you know, with challenging behaviors that are potentially, you know, rooted in trauma or abuse or neglect, you know, building in me time might also feel selfish a little bit. You know, some might even say that it's indulgent or maybe even logistically feel impossible to do. But self-care is so important. You know, you need that regular nourishing and refueling time to stay connected with who you are as a person. You know, you are not just your child's parent. Yes, you know, that is a key component and a key identity that you now have. But it's also really important to find the right balance, you know, for this season of your life. And then, you know, do it. Set aside time, you know, make finding that balance super important. And, you know, making the adjustments that you can to allow that balance to be able to be something that you can do and something you can do consistently. You know, schedule that self-care, just like your work commitments or the doctor's appointments that you set. Utilize your support system to help support you. And so some of the things that you can do is you can, you know, build self-care into your daily routine. Starting out small. You know, if you're not in the habit of regular self-care, build your muscles in small ways for this. You know, scheduling something for yourself once every 2 weeks. You know, be sure to turn off your phone. Delegating things. Setting clear boundaries about your self-care time. You know, indulging in your favorite hobby or activity. Taking those breaks. Sometimes we say there's no time left in the day for self-care, but making the time. You know, if home life is too chaotic, scheduling your breaks and, lunch hour at work so that you can do self-care, unplugging from the screen and technology, learning a new skill or enroll in an online class, journaling, using respite. If you're fostering, then, using respite as a way to get some self-care time. Challenges of single parenting within like the foster care system. When a single person is ready to become a parent, it's not uncommon for them to consider adoption or foster care to create that family. It's also becoming more common for a single person to choose to provide kinship care for their relative children who are needing a safe place to land. While, every adoptive, foster, or kinship parent needs a solid, reliable support network, it's even more critical for single parents to have that strong network to support their families. And we've already talked about the advantages and disadvantages of single parenting in general. But now you throw in, working with this system and having the system, mixed up and a part of your life, and things can even get more complex. So, let's take a look at some of those additional responsibilities and challenges and stressors that come with the job of being a single caregiver. Appointments. There are so many appointments that can come up when you add a child into your home, such as, potentially like family visits, therapy that the child is engaged in, such as OT or PT or other specialized services, doctor's appointments, agency visits, and school meetings. Time management. We talked about how doing it all as a single parent can be exhausting before also adding in the extras of fostering. The impact on your family, how it impacts or maybe, disrupts and changes your nuclear family, as well as also, adding some additional stressors that may come about to your extended family. Impacts on your personal relationships. By the time the dust may settle with getting a child in your home, settled and acclimated to your household and your family, your personal relationships that have maybe taken the back seat for a while during this adjustment, they may have suffered. Navigating childcare, finding childcare that accepts state payments, that can be a challenging experience, trying to find childcare and navigate that. Behavior issues that may arise or, needs that have come about, along with the challenges of state payment for childcare. Another factor can be the child's behavior and challenges that they may currently be experiencing. So then childcare options can be very limited. Disrupting your children's stability. Every now and then placement changes, they can also have a big change on the dynamic of your household, like the birth order, the time and attention that previously, maybe was given to your children, and, now having another child or children in the home, and that changing maybe the time schedule that you had set out. Ensuring a safe environment. not knowing how all the conflict and changes that are happening and for your foster child or the kinship care, like how that will surface, not knowing what it's going to look like potentially day to day. If your family is experiencing difficulties, how you're going to navigate that. If the child has behaviors that at time can, be really big and really disruptive, like how you navigate that environment, change it while also like, ensuring that everyone in the home is safe. Travel, what that maybe looks like as things, progress, like the different potential travel commitments, whether you're traveling to appointments, whether you're potentially traveling to a different school for a time being to help keep, consistency for the child that's with you until maybe other, arrangements can be put in place. Working with a team, not being the sole decision maker. That can be frustrating at times, and it can be hard and a challenge to navigate. There can also definitely be benefits with working, with a team and having that help. But, waiting for approvals, that can be taxing, that can take up a lot of time and energy. Having home visits, having strangers coming into your home on a monthly basis, that can be dysregulating, for yourself, for the children with you. It can feel intrusive at times. In cases, where you are parenting a family member and, you're asked to moderate and facilitate visits or contact with that family member, that can also potentially add additional stress. The demands on your time, the impact that it could have on your job security, the increased stressors when you already identified and talked about being a single parent, but the demands that this can take, the social life, it's like you may feel like you basically don't have one at times, especially if you are an active caregiving family that has a constant placement turnover, the social life impact that it can have. And then co-parenting, you aren't the only parent, you are a co-parent with the children's parents and the state agency that you're working through, as well as also the court system. So then, steps that you can take of creating a support network, being intentional. Single foster, parents and caregivers and, and relative caregivers, they must also be intentional about planning things out, plan for the support that you need, doing what you can to ask for help, and not being afraid of that. Because, you'll need both that immediate help that can come about and also short-term help and also long-term help. And if you're not used to potentially relying on others, taking that step can be difficult and can feel nerve-wracking, or potentially you may find that you always find a reason to not ask for that help. Starting small, start by, saying to yourself, like, yes, when someone makes a general offer, saying yes to that offer. And also, accepting that no is a complete sentence, and being clear and specific about what you and your family need. Build on the habit of saying yes by getting specific with those general, but also at times, vague offers of call me if you need anything. People mean, what they say when they're making that offer, but frequently people may not be taken up on that offer. So ask specifically, say that the child's school is having a bake sale on Friday and I have to work overtime. So being very clear, could you step in and help with this? Because unfortunately, like, I am busy. Figuring out who in your closest network can help you with a regular plan. I'm looking for someone that can take the kids for 2 Saturday mornings a month to give me that time for self-care and for myself, and seeing who can do that. Asking about respite care, checking in about prudent parenting, and what different things can be put in place so that that can happen. Consider relocating, consider moving closer to a support network. For many single parents, your family, they'll often be the most reliable safety net. Your parents and your siblings, for example, are often already deeply invested in you and your dreams and seeing you succeed, and also in your family. So if you're not already living nearby them, potentially consider relocating so that you are able to be closer to them. Being prepared for your family and friend networks to change. Relationships with friends and family are another area where it's necessary to have realistic expectations of that network and acknowledging that circumstances can change. Considering which of your expectations you can be flexible on, and what things you must remain firm on. Looking for an opposite gender role model for your children. Your child, they deserve to be surrounded by extra support and great role models. And, is your child of a different gender than you? It will sometimes take time, but, being very intentional about creating that network for your children. You're looking for that safe person. You're looking for that person that your child can look up to and also, see as a support. You can often find reliable role models, potentially at church, with community groups like Big Brothers, Big Sisters, the YMCA, extracurricular activities, whether it be sports or community events, friends and family who can also commit to be that support person. Engaging in school or childcare communities, building those relationships with other parents through your child's school. And even like with daycare, building those connections with the other parents when possible. Setting a routine, setting a daily routine. I know we've talked about that earlier, but being organized and predictable and consistent. Allowing for do-overs. No one is perfect, and at times, we mess up, and knowing that you're not alone in that. Acknowledging potentially maybe something didn't go as planned, acknowledging that in front of your kids, saying that, being open with it, and being like, well, we'll try it again tomorrow, or we'll, try it again next week. Practicing those do-over moments. Appreciating the grace, that you can get with doing something over again. Taking advantage of co-parenting moments when you have them. Scheduling time for yourself to run errands, meet other obligations, spending time with other children during those times. Your foster child is, at a visit, taking your own children out to do something. Finding a support group with other single parents, in-person groups, virtual groups, just looking into that and taking that time. Because, as you get to know other parents from that groups, then, that can build, further connection and expand your, friendship and support network. And, doing good self-care. We talked about that. We talked about the importance of self-care. Say no to more responsibilities and give yourself permission to, do the things that you need. Make sure that you have, one thing that you look forward to each day. Trying to get to bed early if possible. Being intentional about setting time for yourself. And at times, if you need it, seeking professional help. If you're feeling overwhelmed, reaching out, consider speaking with a counselor or a therapist or someone who specializes in family dynamics. It's important to remember that building a support system takes time and it also takes effort. And you may need to reach out multiple times to people and organizations before you find the support that you need, or before you see that it's, feel that it's like really consistent and dependable. But taking that time and following up. And, and when you are well supported and surrounded by a village of people who invest in your family's success, you can thrive as a parent and your kids will thrive. And, you will feel, that energy and the wellness, to help support your kids. And, creating that support network as a single parent also models life lessons, as we talked about. Your kids will, see you receiving that help and, and taking that help. And they will learn from that value of, asking for help when needed. And more importantly, they may, also learn from your network how to, provide for others and see that, vital care and, nurturing just expression from, those who give you that love and support and, that care, love and support that you provide to your children and share towards others. So we talked about a lot of things this evening, and I would like to conclude with pointing out, a few key points. Single parenting offers independence and decision-making authority and is a rewarding experience. And children of single parents learn independence and responsibility and receive undivided love and attention. Financial insecurity, work overload, loneliness, these can create stress for a single parent. And disciplining children can become difficult at times. But single parents and children develop close bonds from spending time together. Children of single parents learn from their parents and learn from their parents' struggles. And, studies have indicated that most children from single parents and families develop normally and develop, similar to how children do in two-parent households. And so, those are just some of the few, key takeaways that I wanted us to just kind of think about, and refresh our mind with. And in conclusion, as a single parent, building strong family bonds can be one of the most rewarding experiences of your life. From spending quality time with the children, that you're caring for, and communicating open and honestly with them, and, developing those strategies and those approaches to help create a happy and healthy home environment. By acknowledging the challenges that can come from being a single parent and building that support network, and also, nurturing that emotional and well-being, you will be able to navigate those ups and downs of parenting as a single parent, and navigate it with confidence and compassion. And the power of one can definitely not be underestimated.